I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we've got a special treat for you because we're testing the Y63 Nissan Patrol about a year before it's slated to launch in Australia. I've come to the Middle East to drive it. It's an incredibly hot day out today, but it's going to be worth it to have a look at this vehicle, which is going to really define, I think, the luxury full drive segment in 2026 when it will drop in Australia. Now, the Y62 Patrol with the V8, that's still going gangbusters back home. It's really more popular than ever, and this is kind of getting to your last chance to pick one up in the spec that you might like. You've maybe got 12, 18 months left to do that. But then it will be replaced by this Y63. It drops the V8. This is a 6-cylinder vehicle, and while the Y62 is incredibly well priced compared to a 300 series Land Cruiser, here in the Mid-East when Nissan launched the Y63, they jacked up prices by 10 or 15%, so we might see that happen in Australia. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the interior, discuss the running costs, go for a drive, and I'll give you my verdict about whether this is a vehicle you should be waiting for or whether you might want to snap up a Y62, and it will really depend on your preferences. But before we get into all of it, hit subscribe down below.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
The Y63 Patrol was revealed in September 2024 and it went on sale here in the Middle East and in North America before the end of last year. Australia won't get it until well into 2026, partially because Nissan Australia decided to drop a surprise interior facelift into the outgoing Y62 Patrol last month, making the run-out V8 arguably even better value. Pricing has always been a Patrol strong point, especially in light of how expensive the Toyota Prado and 300 series have become. But when the Y63 launched in the Middle East, Nissan put the prices up by about 13%, which would make the Patrol 100 to 120k in Australia if that increase was reflected in our market. So, is there still value for money on display here?
Right, let's look at the controversial bit of the Y63, and that's the powertrains. Now, this Dubai spec car is actually the standard V6, not the twin turbo. This is a 3.8. I have driven the 3.5 litre twin turbo V6, but the twin turbo really boogies more torque accessible at low RPMs compared to the V8. But of course, that signature sound of the 5.6, it's just not there. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the interior of the Y63. Okay, you're gonna have to forgive me. I'm gonna need to turn this thing on because it's 43. I think it's actually probably a bit more in the sun. Check out this crazy tinting that they do across the top of the windscreen here in Middle Eastern markets to keep out more light. The side windows are also extremely tinted. What I'll do is chuck my sunnies over there and I'll put my seat back and we'll go through the interior POV style while my phone cools down. So this is your cockpit right here, and it's a really pleasant place to be. And my first big takeaways after spending about 3 hours driving this vehicle are that firstly, the build quality is really up to scratch. It's really tightly made. This one's got 9,000 Ks on it. So not brand new, but also not old, but everything feels like really well screwed together. Not a single noise from the cabin as I've been driving it, including over some juddery bumps and stuff out here. So while it doesn't feel like the most plush vehicle in the world, it does feel really well made. Second big takeaway, I think you would say the cabin design is much more up to date than the Y62. Now, the Y62 has recently had quite an attractive facelift to its interior, which has brought it up to date, given it Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. So the Y62's cabin is actually, I would say, pretty livable, but the Y63 just takes it to that next level. So here on the steering wheel, really beautiful soft leather wrap. We've got capacitive controls, but they do press in, so they're not too annoying to use. But we still have mostly physical controls for a whole bunch of other stuff here, including our climate across the center. We really needed that today. You can see we've got cooled seats. Not particularly strong cooled seats, I will give you, but the aircon works extremely well. Drive modes here. We've got our four-wheel drive controls, still a 2-speed transfer case, locking rear diff on this vehicle too. And here's your buttons for the transmission, which is now a 9-speed auto. The seats are really comfortable. They're quite firm, unexpectedly firm. They're not kind of plush and lazy boy, but the material quality is decent. They've got massage up front and the adjustment is pretty significant, although you sit high. In the center here, we've got a fridge, cool box. We've got a nice vertically oriented wireless phone charger. And then we've got cup holders here, which are too big for my little water bottles. Some storage down there, as you can see, that's where the plastics get a bit cheaper. But really, for the most part, the materials below the belt line are actually decent. Now, dark black headliner is concealing a pano roof, which I haven't been using today. This sort of cherry red and black interior combo is pretty cool. And you were just getting a glimpse of the back seats, which is where I'm going to take you right now. Jumping into the second row of the Patrol, a bit like a 300 series Land Cruiser, it's kind of not enormous. You can see my legroom's okay, maybe a bit better than a 300. Beautiful big, very tinted windows give a good view out, but for the size of vehicle, it's probably just not as accommodating as a car-based SUV, which is really large with 3 rows, and that's because this is still a body-on-frame vehicle. Looking across to the passenger side, I've got this seat moved all the way forward, so really limo-like space if you do that. Then you've got things like an extra climate zone back here. You've got USB-C ports throughout the vehicle, and you've also got these monitors here, which you can stick HDMI or Miracast. What I wish it had is like Apple AirPlay, which is, you know, what would work with most people's phones. But you do have these ports here to stick like a video game console or something in if you want to do that. We also have a third row. You can get an adult in there if you need to, but it's really a kid-only zone with 3 seats. Next up, let's have a look around the back of the Y63, and we'll also check out the boot space on offer. So around back of our Y63 Platinum, I think you'd say the design's a little bit more up to date. The Y62 wasn't an ugly car, and the facelifts have kept it feeling reasonably new, but this crisp sort of squared off white Y63 presents pretty nicely. Now we've got things like the full width lettering here, Platinum on the back, although I suspect we'll see TI and TIL and probably even Warrior at some stage. Here's the boot space with the third row in place. We've got some really nice features, including a built-in compressor down here, so an easy way to let your tires up or down if you're into your off-roading. And then we've got power operation for the third row. Now, that's not the quickest way to get it done. Manual latches would be quicker, but given this is a sort of 130, 120 grand car in the Middle East, that plushness is kind of the expectation. But look at that enormous van-like boot space, really practical with 5 seats, and still some boot space left if you do the 8-seat mode.
Next up, let's talk running costs. The whole reason to downsize from the fantastic sounding old V8 to the new turbo V6 would be fuel economy, and when the Y63 debuted last year, Nissan claimed it would be 24% better on fuel. That should have seen the official fuel economy land at about 11 litres per 100 kilometres compared to 14 for the Y62 V8. Sadly, it appears the reality isn't that good. The United States EPA figures show only a 12% improvement from Y62 to Y63. Our testing showed that to be about right. We were able to sample both engines, and driving the 3.5 litre twin-turbo model, we saw a steady 10 litres per 100 kilometres on the highway at 110 and 15 litres per 100 kilometres in slower urban driving. That is still better than the Y62, but it's only a slim gain. More annoying is that touring range falls because Nissan has downsized the fuel tank by 30%, down to 97 litres, which gives a sub 1,000 kilometre range in the real world. As for warranty and servicing, we'll have to wait until the Y63's Australian launch, but how does it drive? That's the big question.
Okay, time to take the Y63 for a drive. Selecting drive from the button transmission. It's a bit unusual. So I've been driving the car all day. I've done highways, I've done some B roads, and I've been stuck in traffic jams in Dubai. But where you're with me now is this park, kind of like 50 k's outside Dubai. Really beautiful. Don't know if it's man-made, but it's really nice. And anyway, I've been stuck in Dubai because of the conflict in this region at the moment, which has had an effect on my flights. So I thought, let's not waste the opportunity. Let's go and find a Y63 so I can give you guys some of my thoughts. And I'm keen to let you know how it drives. And the answer is, it drives well. Quite familiarly, if you've had a Y62, they haven't really changed the character of the vehicle, and I'm happy about that. That being said, the Y62, which has persisted for a long time, it definitely had some rough edges. Some things like the steering feel, occasionally brittle ride quality, and of course the fact that the engine needed a big rev to get the best out of it, which is also when it sounded really good, to be fair. There were probably areas for improvement in the Y63, and the Nissan has really hit all of those sorts of targets and then a little bit more. So I'm pleased to say the refinement is actually exceptional in the Y63. The refinement's amazing. At highway speeds, it is so quiet in here. Really the only noise is the air conditioning working hard, because it is 43 out, and if I didn't mention that, I've probably mentioned it about 10 times. Very little wind noise, very little engine noise. It's a super plush and quiet cabin, and the stereo quality with the Klipsch system in the Platinum that I'm driving is really excellent. The engines are interesting. Certainly you miss the sound of the V8, and the V8 was pretty quick when you gave it some as well. The two V6 options that you can get in the Middle East in the Y63 though are pretty solid. Even the base engine is reasonably powerful. It's certainly not fast, and it gets the job done. I guess there's a remote chance if Nissan wanted to keep it a bit cheaper, they might give us the 3.8 litre, but it's less powerful than the V8, so I think that tells a bad story. I think it's more likely we'll see the 3.5 twin-turbo V6 as the sole powertrain in Australia. And that makes about 20 kilowatts more than the V8, but it also makes a lot more torque, 700 Newton meters. And not only is there more torque, it's also available a lot lower in the RPM range. So you don't need to give it heaps in order to get it moving. The Y62 definitely likes a rev. It sounds good when it's revved out, but ultimately the Y63 does feel torquier and more relaxed, particularly with the twin turbocharged powertrain, and that'll suit how I think a lot of people drive vehicles like this. I see a lot of Patrols in town. I know there's also a lot that are used in the bush. That low torquey response of the V6 is nice. That being said, I totally understand if you want to buy the Y62 before it leaves. It's still a proper full drive with a 2-speed transfer case, but the standard transmission in the car has also been upgraded. It's now a 9-speed torque converter unit. Most of the time, there's really no impression of transmission, which is exactly how it should be in a vehicle like this. It just keeps to itself. The general ride and handling demeanor, I think, is a nice improvement from the Y62, which actually already drives okay. It's got an interesting hydraulic suspension control system, which keeps things fairly level in the corners in Y62 guys. If anything, that's been further improved here. The platform's a little bit more rigid than it was, and you can feel the effect of that in the corners where things just feel a bit less wobbly, a bit less weird and vague. The whole vehicle feels more like a unibody SUV than it did in the past. It's quite pleasant to drive, and in particular, Nissan have worked on the steering. So the electric power steering tune is pretty nice in this vehicle. It's more direct. There's less of a dead spot on center, still a little bit, which does increase the relaxation on the highway because it's not always twitching in your hands. But when you do turn into a corner, there's more response more quickly. The handling continues to be decent. I think the handling is a cut above a 300 series in this vehicle. Feels a little bit more rigid, feels a little bit more immediate, and the body control is superior, which is a really nice trait of the Patrol. The ride is decent. So we have a relatively small wheel, pretty chunky Geolander tire in this spec, but we don't have air suspension. You can get air ride in the Y63 on top trims. We'll see if that comes to Australia. But even without air suspension, the ride in this spec is really good. There's still that sort of underlying firmness that you got in the Y62, but I just think it's a little bit more rounded off actually, and there's less jittering and juddering through to the cabin. In fact, the cabin's really isolated for a body-on-frame vehicle. Probably one of the very best frame vehicles in terms of not juddering around like you're driving some kind of tractor. The 300 series is pretty good too, but I actually think the Y63 is a cut above that vehicle. I really like the tuning of the safety systems as well. We've got Nissan's Pro Pilot. Hopefully that comes to Australia in full. Driving down the motorways here, you can just throw that system on. It's got strong lane centering. It's not always bothering you about takeover steering. It seems to detect your hands on the wheel. But I can't lie to you, my first impressions of driving this vehicle are pretty good. It still drives fundamentally like a Y62 in that it's decent in terms of handling. I think the ride's better, the steering's better, and the powertrains are not really a bummer. I think, you know, a lot of people will like the easy torque of the twin turbo V6 if they give it a chance, but naturally that V8, the loss of the V8, is going to be a bummer for some people. When the Y63 does eventually arrive, I think people will be pleasantly surprised that it's a pretty decent drive, at least from my impression today. So then, what are my thoughts from my first drive, my first day with the Y63 Nissan Patrol, with the caveat the steering wheel is on the wrong side of the vehicle for the Australian audience. Look, I don't think it's a threatening vehicle. I think there's a lot to be said for the current V8, and the Y62 is now the best it's ever been, with a pretty modern interior and a really good price. So if you're into the V8, I'd just buy one of those while they're still really affordable. Everything's relative, of course. We're still talking about a six-figure vehicle here at the end of the day. But if you don't really care for the V8, or it's coming time in the next few years for you to update your Patrol, I don't think you have to be too worried about the Y63, because it pretty much feels like a Y62, but a bit more rigid, a bit more modern, better steering, slightly better ride, although its dynamics were never sort of terrible to begin with. Plus the fuel efficiency is a little bit better. You might just miss that V8 roar, which is a real feature of that Y62. So on the whole, I feel reasonably positive about this vehicle. I'd be keen to see what Premcar could do to it for a new gen Warrior. Looking forward to the Australian launch, and of course you'll catch all of our local content on Chasing Cars at that point if you subscribe and hit the notification bell. But at this stage, I would say, yeah, mildly positive impression of the Y63. Let's just hope they don't jack up the price into 300 series territory. Well, that's been my review and my first thoughts. Thanks for watching Chasing Cars.